Okay, so where we were, I was saying that this particular response right here, if I were scoring that, I'd probably be nice and give it a 1. But on the AP exam, they're a little more strict. It may get a 0 because while there's nothing in here, and this is what I know is kind of really frustrating sometimes. There's nothing in here that is wrong. There is nothing in here that is incorrect. There's nothing in here that is inaccurate, but it doesn't follow the rules. It doesn't play the game. It is way too vague. It doesn't give any specific examples about specific changes to specific people. It doesn't mention, we just looked a moment ago at some of the, possible SFI that could be used, like about the command system and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't include any of those things. So let me show you a couple of smaller examples of kind of a good or really not good way to do it, a better way, and then the right way. So let's say that we decided we're going to go with an example being the introduction of new livestock like horses and how the horse changed the lives of some Native Americans. Okay, here's where this is a vague example. This wouldn't get the point. The arrival of Spanish settlers to the Western Hemisphere introduced the horse to the lives of Native American societies. The horse would create many changes for Native American life. That probably would not get the point because it's still just too vague. It just says it'll bring many changes to Native American life. It doesn't say which Native Americans. It does not say what those changes are. So it's kind of trying to answer the question. It sort of cites an example with the horse, but it's not expanding on it and explaining why that is answering the question. This one's a little bit better. This might get the point. It would certainly probably get some partial credit from me. The introduction of the horse by Europeans to Native Americans would have a dramatic impact on many Native American societies. The arrival of the horse allowed tribes to travel further than before and more effectively hunt animals. So it does give it expands a little bit to say, this is how the introduction of the horse changed the lives of Native Americans. So it's still kind of vague, but it does do a much better job than the first one. Now, this is a very good example. And here, once again, we're just talking about part of the question. This would just be the part A or B. The introduction of the horse to the Western Hemisphere would have a dramatic impact on many Native American societies. The arrival of the horse increased mobility and efficiency of indigenous people on the Great Plains. So there it's more specific, mentions a specific group of people. As a result of the horse, Native people could more effectively hunt animals such as the bison, and warfare would increase between neighboring tribes as they competed for resources. So that answers the question. Here's the way it changed. It gives an example like the horse, and then it gives it expands on that and explains why that is the answer to the question. Okay. Okay, let's talk about that part C. Part C asked for a response or reaction to that to the arrival of Europeans, between Europeans and the Native Americans. Again, this is stuff that we haven't talked about yet, some of which we might not even discuss in our notes. There's no way for us to discuss everything. But here are some possibilities, even though I realize this might look foreign to you. Some tribes formed alliances, and you could mention some specific examples of alliances of Native Americans trying to work together to combat European expansion. Some of them try to fight back. There are some specific examples of them trying to fight back, like the Pueblo people revolting against the Spanish. Some trying to maintain their religious and cultural practices. Some of them trying to escape where Europeans had sort of held them captive in some cases. Some even developing trade alliances with European colonies. Tomorrow, or Monday rather, we'll talk about the Dutch and really the French and how they actually saw a lot of Native Americans as allies and they were forming alliances together. But again, those are specific examples. So let me show you. So again, the last one said, the earlier example I showed you, just said, sometimes they rebelled. It needs to be a specific instance. Okay, you got to be specific, not vague. So this overall, this is a pretty good answer. I would think this one would get all of the points, or at least 2 of the points. And this is more in line with the kind of thing I would probably expect to see a lot of you write. So this says, contact between Native American and European societies brought significant change between 1492 and 1700. Notice they're answering the question. One example of this change is the way Native American societies were forced into slave labor by the colonizing Spanish. They utilized the encomienda system, we'll talk about that tomorrow, to force Native Americans to mine or grow crops. Okay, there's part A. Another example of change brought by that contact is the introduction of new crops and animals. Among other things, Europeans introduced livestock such as the horse. Goes on to talk about the horse in the Great Plains. We went over that in just a moment ago. And then part C, the response. This did lead to them resisting the expansion of European colonizers. The Spanish noted multiple revolts by the Native Americans as they conquered such as the Aztecs, and that led them to introduce African slavery as a means of forced labor. So this is a pretty good response. So you can kind of see the length of it. But once again, the biggest problem that I have is people write stuff that is not wrong, but it's just too vague. And particularly when we get into some of the examples where you have to like explain historians' point of view, people just kind of really generally paraphrase. We'll do some more of those examples a little bit later on. So what I want to do now is you're not going to write this one. We're going to kind of just talk through it. I want us to sort of talk about what might go in here, and I'm not going to write it all the way through just for time purposes. But this is also another format of these kind of questions that you're oftentimes going to see where it gives you a stimulus. So this is a stimulus one. In this case, it's a painting. But you're oftentimes going to see one that has a picture. It might be a map. It might be a cartoon, things like that. And it asks you some, to explain some stuff related to it. And then I'm going to give you one that's a little bit different that you will answer on your own. Okay, so it says, explain the historical development depicted in the image above. Explain one specific reason for the historical development depicted in an image. And then one specific historical development that resulted from the events depicted in the image. So you notice it's not a describe the picture, you see. A lot of times people get confused or they start to think, oh, well, as long as I've got a picture or something I can read, I just have to describe it, talk about it, and I don't have to really know anything. But that's not the case. You have to kind of know what this is all about. So I tried to make this one something that, we have enough knowledge about to be able to get through this, and I think we do. So this image, what historical development is depicted in this image? Yes?
Christopher Columbus landing in the Bahamas.
Right. Specifically, this is showing us the arrival of Europeans, probably most specifically Christopher Columbus. So we could say that the image depicts the arrival of Christopher Columbus to the Americas, and maybe another sentence kind of describing that. The mistake would be to say, this depicts Europeans coming to the New World. That's too vague. Okay, so be very, very specific. All right, what's the specific reason for the historical development depicted in the image? Yes?
A specific reason for the historical development would be to find new trade routes to Asia.
Okay.
Another one could be just the start of Africa.
Very good. So there are multiple possibilities here. That's kind of the point we want to make. We could say a specific reason was the trying to find new trade routes. We want to be specific about silks and spices, the Spanish, things like that. We could say about religion, religious tensions, and trying to spread, in the case of the Spanish, the Catholic faith, those sorts of things. What is one specific historical development that resulted from the events depicted in this image? Yes.
The Columbian Exchange.
Okay, one example could be the Columbian Exchange. We could write about that. What else could we say besides Columbia? That's a good example. What's another possibility? What do we think? And realize, go ahead.
The fall of many Native American tribes.
Yes, we're going to see the destruction of a lot of Native American tribes due to diseases and being taken over and all of that. And once again, in a couple of days, you'll have more information about that. You can give a specific example, those sorts of things. After tomorrow, we'll talk more about colonization. So you can talk about colonization and the encomienda system and using Native Americans as labor, all that sort of stuff. So there's multiple specific things you could utilize as examples for that, okay? Okay, so the best way to get better at doing this is by practicing it. So we're going to do one. You're going to do one on your own now. And this one does relate to something you've got information about. So if you'll open up Google Classroom, please.